This is Jamel Mosley from Collectiveffort, Upstate's Cold Brew and the Pickle, and you're listening to Troy's Story, a podcast for the Collar City.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Troy's Story, a podcast for the Collar City. I am very fortunate to have our next guest here with us, Jamel Mosley. He is a photographer, videographer, visual artist, DJ, entrepreneur, producer, owner of Upstate Cold Brew, Collectiveffort, and the Whiskey Pickle on Fulton Street in downtown Troy, the new owner. So thank you for doing this. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So how did you come about buying a bar, a venue in downtown Troy? How did that happen?
Uh, yeah. I just want to make a addition to what you said and just let people know I'm the co-owner of all of these things. And now currently the majority owner of the Whiskey Pickle, which we are going to start calling just the Pickle. And the way that that happened is I found out the way that everyone else found out, which was a that it was closing, and it was a an Instagram post, I think maybe even Instagram and Facebook post, where uh, it was announced that they were closing. You know, one of Troy's most beloved bars, and I've DJ'd there a number of times, and I loved it there. I love the owners, James and Aaron, and I called up James, and he's uh, clearly feeling the heaviness of it as I'm talking to him because I think it may have even been the same exact day that they put it up. I went by there, and it was it wasn't just an announcement that they were going to close. It was an announcement that they are closed. You know, it was the weekend, you couldn't even get in. I called him. He sounded very heavy. And he said he can't do it. Um, and I said, hey, let's meet, let's figure this out. I'm a marketer. Um, I have a way of kind of getting community together. Let's figure this out. He said, all right, let's meet. Um, I met with him, and pretty much he was, kind of just done with the business. I think a bit burnt out and ready to let it go, unfortunately. And another place I DJ'd, the Night Owl, I was a resident DJ up there. One of the owners there, Alex Strauss, hit me up and said, hey, you need to do something with the pickle. I know we've talked about maybe doing some type of bar in the past, but I think you could really save this place. So he has years of experience with not only owning bars, but also running them and bartending experience all across the country, and even being a marketer and distributor for alcohol brands across the world. Um, so very knowledgeable. He's my partner in operations. So he's a minority owner of the business and helping with a lot of the back end while I'm the on location presence and doing all the other stuff. So yeah, it's just really worked out.
Did you ever see yourself owning a bar or a restaurant or some sort of retail space like this in the past? Obviously, you're a co-owner, co-founder of a number of different businesses, but this is like you know, a different animal, I guess, in this particular case.
You know what? Honestly, I think I did, but it would probably have been, I think I visualized myself as someone maybe in their 60s, 70s, owning a watering hole that only my friends come to, you know? So this is definitely a little bit different in the fact that, we have music performances every single night. We have a DJ every night, at least like four times a month. We'll have a live band. We've been having jazz and um, R&B and rock and folk and all different types of stuff. It's been really dope to have uh music in that space. So it's becoming more of a space where it's like very music focused.
Was that kind of the vision from the jump when you decided to, okay, myself and my partner, we're going to go in and purchase this? Was that always the vision to make it more music oriented?
So they have done a lot of music things there before. Like I know they had obviously they had me there and a bunch of other DJs. I think yeah, I think just going into it as a DJ, it allows me to like really curate what the vibe is going to be. Um, so yeah, I think it was always going to be kind of music focused, but then really just getting in there and trying to knock the rust off the wheels and like try to figure out how to make it a really clean, well-oiled machine, you know, from like super simple fixes to like really listening to what our customers are saying, listening to what our bartenders and our bar managers are saying, and ways in which we can really um, make the space like something that is easier for them to work in, something that is more efficient for them to work in, and someplace that they love to work and love to be. So whether that's, you know, certain music they want to hear, certain DJs they want, certain bands they want, um, certain drinks that they want to see in there, uh, different ways to do things more efficiently, you know, just being very open, understanding that I'm in here, I don't know everything, I'm learning with everyone, and it's been really cool.
Were there any specific like challenges that you came up against that you kind of didn't expect as sort of like a first time bar venue owner, you know, from some of your other businesses that you run?
Yeah, I think just dealing with all the personalities is is just so interesting. You know, you get regulars and like, you know, having to remember everyone's names and like wanting to make them feel like special. You know, everybody just wants to feel special. They want to feel like they're the only one in the bar sometimes. And that's been like cool, but it's also a challenge, you know. Um, sometimes it's like, you know, they people might want an experience that they've experienced in the previous ownership, but you know, just kind of have to understand that, you know, we're able to keep the bones of it. We're able to keep like the DNA of it, but we're really going to have our own spin as well. So, figuring out ways to honor the old ownership while, you know, doing what we do.
Most people have probably seen the issue, but you were on the front cover of the
Yeah.
Metroland Now, excuse me, the Metroland Now, the January 2025 issue, and I saw this and I grabbed it. I was out for lunch one day and I grabbed it. And I was like, oh, that's awesome, that's great. How was that? How was that experience? You know, Metroland being an institution, it obviously kind of disappeared for a little
Yeah.
bit, and it's been relaunched as Metroland Now. What was it like, sort of getting the front cover of the local arts magazine?
Yeah, so I talked to Erin Harks. It was my first time really speaking to her. I knew who she was. Um, and we did something like this, which was just like a podcast recording. I thought that's all it was going to be. Maybe they'd write up a little story on me. And one day she just pulled up to the Pickle and she has a huge stack of these what is it called? Publications. And I'm like, what? What? I
Oh,
didn't know I
you.
was going to be on the front cover. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
But yeah, Kiki Vasilakis came by and took pictures, and I was like, all right, this is cool. It might be online or something. I didn't know it was going to be a cover story. I didn't know it was going to be like 4 pages. So it was cool.
Yeah, it's a big spread. It's a long story. There were a lot of different
Yeah.
photos in there. I'm surprised that
There were
you
like
didn't know.
20,000 of them in circulation. It's crazy.
Yeah, your face is literally all over the capital region, like
Yeah.
in bars and coffee shops. Your picture,
Yeah. It's
and
wild.
now in people's homes when they take a copy home with them.
Yeah. Exactly. So there have been people who recognize me from that. So I'm grateful that they did that.
I bring the Metroland story up is because it doesn't just cover the pickle and sort of the relaunch, like you just talked about, sort of honoring the spirit of the original bar, but kind of giving it a new feel and vibe and direction. But it also goes way deep on your personal story and where you came from and your sort of your career trajectory that you've had, all the different things that you've done. And I was thinking about it. I've known you for 10 years. I think goes back to you doing some video work for one of the bands that I was in. But I hadn't reading the story. I had not realized. Obviously, everybody has a long career, and you and I are almost exactly the same age. But you've done a lot of different things, and you've worked in a
Yeah.
lot of different places, whether it is sort of independent or corporate or multimedia. Um, Kind of like where does today, where does your story sort of start when you think about where you are today and where you came from?
Well, I think, and we understand as, when we got out of college, around like 2007, 2008, the world was like a wild place. It was like we were thrown into a space where I don't think there were many jobs or like, and then when there were jobs, they had you doing everything. So, and it seemed like a place where a person like me kind of thrived because I did everything, and I knew I wanted to do everything at a young age. I knew I wanted to be um, someone who did art. I knew I wanted to be someone who did music. I knew I wanted to be someone who interacts with people. I wanted to do it all, So going into, I guess, the workforce at that time, with internships turning into like, part-time jobs and then also freelancing on the side. Um, it was just it was just ripe for me. So I guess the beginning, what was the question? What you said the beginning of my story?
Yeah, I mean, kind of where you graduated from college and where your career sort of started and where you are now, kind of where it began.
Yeah. So coming out of college, I worked in New York City, interning at a post-production studio. So that's where I was able to interact with a bunch of the different producers from the biggest production houses and networks in the world, from the NBCs and then the smaller networks that were under those, like the National Geographics and Discovery Channels and Nickelodeons and things like that. Um, Built up my resume a bit in New York City, and like while being down there, being able to network and meet people who I have through relationships to this day, um, while also working here at LaSalle school, the one for kids who might be put into like a group home or something like that. So I was working there and I was working at an after school program. And at the same time, figuring out ways in which, all right, I'm working in this after school program and learning therapeutic crisis intervention and things like that. Things that I found that I need today in the bar, and figuring out how to de-escalate people. Like my story is so wild that, it shows that every single moment has a meaning and it has set me up for success today. So I was working with these kids, and at the same time, I'm like, trying to figure out how do I really make this work for me. So in that moment, I was like, let's make a program called Lyrical Leaders. And Lyrical Leaders was a program where I was teaching kids how to write rhymes and produce music and use SAT words for understanding inside of their lyrics and things like that. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna make something interesting and also build my resume. Then I was working at GE, doing IT, doing video production, doing anything they wanted me to do. Um, and then from there, I got the opportunity to travel um, with something called your global passport, and that was wild. We went to Rwanda and Tanzania and Guatemala, London, and I was a director on that program, filmmaker, photographer. Came back and I just grinded, man. I was just I didn't want to go back to the corporate world, so I got that opportunity and I was kind of left with an ultimatum. Hey, you can travel the world for 3 months or you can take a leave of absence here and see if we hire you back when you get back. And I was just like, I'm gonna travel. And then I came back and, I looked at the first year of how much I made. And it was just like $18,000. And I was like, I remember I had to really reframe what that $18,000 meant. And it was like, yeah, I made only $18,000 this year, but I traveled for 3 months, a quarter of the year. I had to move home. I had to move back in with my mother. So I saved a little bit of money. I didn't have to spend, $12,000 on rent for that year. Um, yeah, and I was happy. And I did it all just based off of my own skills. And I was able to see it. I was able to see the way that the product that I put out and that I make um, really just return. Like I was able to see the returns of the work that I put in, and I couldn't see that when I was working for the state. I couldn't see that when I was working for GE. So it was just like an epiphany. And then once I was able to harness the power inside of, that knowing and then lining up exactly, okay, what is it that I need to make every single week in order to be comfortable? This number. All right, now that I have this number, when I'm negotiating contracts, if I'm taking a week to make this product, I need to make at least this amount for this week of work, right? It's should
Yeah.
be simple, right? So after discovering that, I was able to double then triple my income. And then in the following years, and then I was able to replace the income that I was making at GE.
And you never look back.
Never looked back.
That must be
Not
a really cool
not
feel.
one time.
That must be a really cool feeling to be able to just be your own, ostensibly your own boss.
Yeah.
Oh, how old were you at the time was that like 10, 12 years ago or so? How long have you been sort of
So
self-employed?
2014 was when I left my 9 to 5. So it'll be 11 years.
That's pretty amazing.
Oh, it has been 11 years. So it was in January.
That's
But
pretty amazing. That like I mean, for a lot of people, most people will settle for sort of I don't like to use the term reliable but or consistent, but just sort of, you have a weekly set amount of hours, you go to work, you come home, whether it's whatever your choice is. But I mean, it must have been a lot. It sounds like all of your collective experiences built you towards being able to self-launch whatever your current career is now and all these different businesses that you've created. But that's an incredibly like commendable thing. I think it's really difficult. Not many small businesses kind of like um, are able to subsist for an extended period of time.
yeah, I think it was because I was fate. It's because I faced that ultimatum, that it seemed just wouldn't anyone make that decision? I almost feel like, you have the chance to go to Rwanda, Tanzania, Guatemala, and you're like on the Serengeti and you're climbing active volcanoes and you're having the dream job. Like I just feel like you're exploring rainforests and you're sleeping in the Serengeti. Like it was crazy. And I feel like anybody would have made the same decision. But also I do recognize I'm a little bit of a maniac, and I think my perception of risk might be very different for a lot of people. When I think of risk, right? Like the risk to jump out and take on this big venture and put in this amount of money, you know, I often think about the opposite. Like I think about how sad and unfulfilled I felt when I was in that like cubicle. It wasn't, I don't even know if it was like 8 by 8 feet when I was working for the state, you know? That's the risk I have of like, being in that cubicle and not really harnessing all of the skills that I've been given um, is way too big of a risk.
Do you have a specific bit of advice that you'd recommend to people who are considering kind of uh, setting off on their own, or is everybody's situation is so different? Or is there a universal sort of truth or piece of advice you could give people who are thinking about this?
Um, Also, I almost kind of want to go back a little bit before I answer that question because I feel like I left out a lot of the story where it was just like I think I brought you up to like 2014, but I didn't go into like getting involved with the Albany Barn on their board of directors and volunteering and getting connected with people inside of people inside of the places that I wanted to be doing work for. So at this time, I was doing a lot of video production, and I'm like, all right, I want to do video production for small business, medium business corporations, and things like that. So being a part of this board of directors and volunteering, I got myself in front of a lot of different people that could see my work. And then we had a space inside of the Albany barn, and from there, it led to a lot of different collaboration and conversations to where um, I'm like, why don't we just share, or myself and my friends were like, why don't we just share some of the resources that we have, whether that's the cameras, the time, our expertise, I'm really great at the technical aspects of production. My business partner Patrick is really great at project management. My other business partner Deshaun is great at getting out there and just filming. So we started to kind of join the team and became the Avengers as collective effort. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Also wanted to make sure I mentioned how at the same time there was we're all talking about like how do we build community through different ways, through different avenues, and one of them was through coffee, and we wanted to make a coffee shop, but through different things and overhead and like finding the right space and things like that, we ended up not making a coffee shop. So we started to experiment. What would a pop-up look like? What would different ways to brewing methods and things like that. So we started to mess around with cold brew and we would introduce it to some of our friends. And that's where Upstate cold brew came from with my business partner, colleague. So just wanted to mention those two things. And what was that question you just asked?
Oh no, no, I appreciate you because I was going to come around to collective effort, and I knew the Albany Barn component too. I did want to bring those up, but I just was referencing back to your decision to sort of step away from the traditional 9 to 5 corporate, et cetera. If there is a piece of advice that you could give to those who are thinking about it, if there is one, what what you would say to someone who would be considering following you or doing something
Yeah.
similar to what you did.
Yeah, I think my superpower is just having a really bad memory. So, and what I say by that is when I see something as a failure, I just move on, man. And I do not harp on it. I do not stay in that mode. I'm trying to figure out the next most creative way to pivot, or that didn't work. Here was the lesson that we learned in it, and then this is how we move forward. You know, I think that's it. And also I can give up power very easily. I remember feeling like, you know, oh, we have to have 100% of everything. And like we don't, if you're able to bring other people in to make this project happen, do that. Make it happen, because there's a lot of people with brilliant, great ideas out there that they'll never get out because, they're holding it so close to themselves. Get out there, collaborate, give up power. Don't worry about the dollar all the time. You know, those things.
I think that's an incredible superpower ability to have is to shake off failure. I think that's like the most, for me, I think that's the thing that I struggle with. And not just me, I think a lot of people struggle with
Yeah.
the concept of failure when you come up and you're like, viewing it as a learning experience, or if you said just to be able to move past it and try something else and not let yourself get stuck there, I think is very difficult to be able to achieve um, as like a mantra, as like an approach to everything that we do.
Yeah. I also think that I'm really good at starting things. Um, I think I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. And I think that is really important. And then also to communicate those things, especially if you're on teams. Um, my friends and or I mean my the co-owners of Collective Effort and we all read this book called Poke the Box, and it's kind of about the importance of people who are the initiators and people who are the creatives and the people who are able to get things started and understand there is a place for those people, even if they're not the people who can follow through or maintain. I think sometimes I have issues with maintaining things because, and I think that's something that a lot of artists can struggle with. It's like we have all of these great ideas, but we feel guilty when we can't do them or can't follow through. But it might be your place in the universe to have the ideas. You might not be the person to execute them. Like they figured it out in like the music industry and the movie industry and a lot of these other places because that's what they often call like producers or executive producers. Sometimes it's just a person with the idea.
And you're at least involved in some capacity guiding that
Yeah,
vision, because you got
yeah,
way more people. More people can, many hands make light work, etc. Especially
exactly.
with creatives. Once you get creative people together, it's
Yeah,
about, I think it's about guiding that group of people on the
yeah. A
right
lot of
path.
times we feel like we have to do it all ourselves, but we don't.
Collective Effort has been around how many years now?
2017.
I remember we did the ribbon cutting for the location that is
That,
on River Street, right? And that was
that was our first location.
yeah,
Fish.
2020.
Yep.
And that was the last ribbon cutting that we did when I worked for the mayor right before COVID struck.
Wow. That's ridiculous. Yeah, we decided to open up a co-working space like a couple weeks before COVID, and it was all shut down. And in that moment, we had to pivot as well. People couldn't do co-working. We did some remote stuff. People lost jobs, especially the creatives, people who were just freelancing. I remember, I'm also a DJ. I remember it was like 75% of everything was just gone. I remember looking at my income and just saying, yeah, I have 25% of what I would have made in these past 2 months. Um, because I had no security in those gigs, from weddings, which was making me money, to venues and things like that. I just couldn't do it. So one of the things that we did in order to help creatives is uh, we were able to get some sponsorships for a show that we launched called CETV, Collective Effort TV. And it was kind of like a variety show where we were featuring different artists, um, music artists, to people who would even come on and knit or crochet and talk to you in a sweet voice. And we're like, all right, here's $50 for 15 minutes of your time, or come in and say some poetry, or come and perform, or do a DJ set or something like that. And we were able to make that work and make a little bit of money for us, and build capacity for us to do streaming while also providing support for artists.
I think COVID really knocked the hell out of the whole creative community in general.
Yeah.
Restaurants, like you just said, venues. We had Dan Fremont, from former owner of Mud Daddy Flats, is now closed, and he talked a bit about this too, the way that it just kind of upended his business model, and he just had to try something new. He went all in on the food truck. He went all in on outside events. And he spent a lot of time and effort and money into doing that. So you're while each person's story is unique, there's sort of like that overarching
Yeah.
moment in time. Everybody, you and Dan and everybody else, kind of had to shift their mindset and shift their model, and I can't even imagine what that was like. We touched on this a little bit, this sort of personal mantra and philosophy that you seem to have when you approach your work. Do you, and you said, the superpower of not getting stuck or mired in sort of failure, and being a self-starter and be able to pick something up. Is that just something you've always had, or did you kind of like come to that post corporate, post 9 to 5 career?
I think it might have been something I've always had because, um, yeah, I've always loved school. I've always been someone who loved problem solving. I think that motivates me. But then also, I've seen how hard my mother has worked all of her life. I've seen how hard my aunts and uncles and my father have always worked, as entrepreneurs. And yeah, I think it's something that's kind of I've mirrored from the people I was closest to, or people I've seen growing up.
What brought you to attend RPI? So your connection, obviously, you work in Troy, and you own multiple businesses based in Troy. But what's the story behind you ending up at RPI, and what'd you study?
So RPI was the only school I applied to.
Wow.
And the reason why is because, yeah, even in high school, I knew I wanted to do everything. And most of the time, when I was applying for different programs, you would see, um, the program would be like very specific. graphic design, you're doing graphic design for 4 years. Video production, you're doing video production for 4 years, or film for 4 years, whatever. Music, you're doing music for 4 years, computer animation. So RPI at that time was one of the only places in the country that had this program where you can do basically multimedia. You can do it all. So I went for electronic media arts and communications. And basically what that was is I was able to study computer animation. I was able to do some marketing work in there. I was able to do some computer music and recording arts in there. I was able to do some video production in there. I was able to do some graphic design. It was all encompassing. So that's what I took while I was there.
What was the experience like attending RPI? Again, we're the same age, so graduating obviously in '08, that was a or '07, that was an incredibly difficult time for the nationally and internationally. But what was that? Do you have fond memories of RPI? What was your experience going there, and sort of were you living on campus?
Yeah, I lived on campus for 3 out of 4 years. The last year I lived in an apartment on 4th Street. Um, and I loved it. I really enjoyed RPI. I think the program was sort of experimental in ways to where it wasn't like, very strict, this is the way that you do this every time kind of thing. It was more like very conceptual and like introductory. And now you find your path, which worked for me because right after that, I went to Florida and did a program in recording arts at Full Sail University, and really uh, just kind of honed my skills in recording art since I knew I wanted to run a music studio at some point. So I was able to do that.
We've done a lot of episodes about concerts at the Field House, and obviously concerts at the Field House kind of went away after a certain point. Was there a lot of live music on campus while you were there? Did you see a lot of bands? I know, like at the student union, they used to have performances, but I'm just curious to know if you remember any sort of like mid level acts that came through when you were there.
I don't remember. No, I don't know if that was a thing while I was still there. Yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed, honestly, the best thing for me were the student organized performances and events and things like that because I would be involved in them. We had a rap group, so it was cool.
What was the rap group called?
Our rap group was called The Prescription. Yeah,
Did you perform on campus at all? Was it all
did
fellow students?
we did. We performed on campus a few times. So like the Black Student Alliance events and things like that. Yeah.
That's what's so amazing about RPI is that there's like this whole like mini micro community
Oh,
within
absolutely.
Troy. However, I mean, I don't know how many students, what the student body size was back then. It's still, I'm assuming, it was still pretty sizable, but it's just kind of wild. It's this little sort of pocket of student life
Yeah.
built within this massive, massive campus in the middle of the city.
Yeah. It's really wild. We really had our own world up there. I think even just growing up in Albany and then not going very far, but still having a completely different capital region experience that's so very specific to right there. I think at the time we were the most like wired uh campus in the nation, where it was just like we had the most internet connectivity or something like that, where like at any point you can just plug into the wall with your laptop and you'd be on your LAN, and we would be playing Counter-Strike, in the middle of the Union, or uh, we would go out to like there's a club called Sneaky Pete's, and be there and party and then come back home and it's 4 o'clock in the morning and people will send a message like Counter-Strike, and we'd be playing Counter-Strike at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was a wild experience, but I really loved it.
when you were at RPI, did you do a lot of off campus activities? Like, did you go downtown? Did you participate in a lot of the sort of events that were happening at the time, or was it still more a little bit more insulated up on campus on the hill?
I think I did. There was what was that bar that was above the old it's above Bacchus, Daisy Baker's?
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah, we would go to Daisy Baker's sometimes. There would be like a party there. We would go to parties at different colleges for sure, like SUNY, Union. We would go to their parties. We had, and being from here, I had friends who were, close by too. So we would visit those friends. Um, then what else? What was cool about the faculty in our program is that they would do art shows, in downtown Troy sometimes, and we'd pull up to the art shows, So that was cool.
Yeah, I ask because when, like, again, when I talk to a lot of people, it's just this huge community up on the hill, and there's always this effort to sort of like draw the students out from campus
Yeah.
out to the city, support the restaurants, support the small businesses. When they have the Welcome Fest, now they do it right in Riverfront Park. It's like this big thing to sort of introduce the students to the idea of like you don't have to stay on campus. You can kind of explore the city. So my last question that we kind of ask everybody is, how do you sort of enjoy Troy every week? You obviously are a business owner, and now you own a you own a bar and a venue. But how have you sort of enjoyed Troy over the years, and how do you still enjoy Troy?
There's so much to do in Troy. I love the thing I often say is that there's power in options. There's power and opportunity. Even if that means there are 7 coffee shops downtown, I have the power to choose, and I will choose all of them. I'm going to go to Stacks for this reason. Then the next day, I'm going to go to Jacob Alejandro for this reason. Then the next day, I'm going to go to Little Peck's for this reason. And then I'm going to go to Mojo's for this reason. And then, I'm going to go to Placid Baker because, they have the best pastries, and I'm able to do all of this because I have the power to choose. Um, and then I'm going to there. We have so many great organizations like Troy Bike Rescue, which I love those guys, and the Sanctuary for Independent Media. And then, we have great places to work, like, the Lucas Confectionery Garden, which I love. Um, Bard Baker, I love them so much. I love Naughters. I got the best French omelet ever the other day. And Nighthawks with their burgers. Oh, Herbie's burgers are great. We have so many great places to eat and drink and dine and just enjoy yourselves. We have great communities. Like I love the biking community here. Um, we have a great running community too. Great arts community. There's a lot of really dope arts organizations here, like Colorworks and the Arts Center and all of the things. And then we're able to, and the thing I love about Troy specifically is that I think you can do things and typically the city will get out of your way, you know, and then uh getting your permits and things like that, I found it a little more helpful and easy than a lot of other cities around here. So it's been good, man.
Where can people find you? Can find the Pickle, a collective effort? Are there specific places people can go to find out more?
Yeah, find us on Instagram, Collective Effort. There's a shared E in the middle there. So COLLECTIVEFFORT. You can find me at Jamel Mosley on Instagram. You can find Whiskey Pickle at Whiskey Pickle Troy. Um, if you're interested in anything I'm DJing, Intel Hayesfield, you can find Upstate's Cold Brew at Upstate's Cold Brew.
Awesome.
I think that's about it.